Hey everybody, this is Miss Eisencraft, and I'm here to give you a little bit of help on this week's practice worksheet if you need it for cosine and sine graphs. So the first two ask you to write an equation for a graph that is given. So the first one asks you to write the cosine graph. So we're going to look at it and kind of compare it to the parent function. So I first notice the midline is up here at 1. The amplitude is also 1. Amplitude 1, midline 1. All right. Now, I'm also going to imagine cosine graph. If this was like the origin, just pretend like this midline is the origin here. The x-axis moved up. Usually cosine starts at 1 up here and then comes down. So I'm going to, you can look in, or you can think of the shift as happening left or right, but I'm just going to say what happens. I'm just going to always imagine the shift being to the right. So this would be the start of my graph that used to be over here. So it looks like it got shifted to the right 3 pi halves. Okay, whoopsie. So other than that, we need to look at the frequency. So the cosine graph has a frequency of 1, meaning it makes one full cycle from 0 to 2 pi, or it takes the distance of 2 pi to make a full cycle. So let's see what happens from 0 to 2 pi. Oopsie daisy. 0 to 2 pi. It looks like that is a full cycle. So the frequency is 1. Let's go ahead and write the equation. Y equals amplitude is 1, so we're not going to write anything in front. Cosine frequency is 1, so just x. 3 pi halves to the right, so minus 3 pi halves. That needs to be in parentheses with the x. And then up 1, boom. And then you, of course, would check that using Desmos. All right, next one, let's write a sine equation for the graph below. First thing I'm going to look at is the midline. It's right up there, right there at 0, so it did not shift up or down. The amplitude it's looking like it's exactly at a half. Amplitude equals 1/2. All right. The sine graph, the parent function, starts at 0, 0, and then goes up. So this did not shift, does not have a phase shift. But the frequency, it typically will make one full cycle between 0 and 2 pi. And it looks like here that it makes 1, 2, 3, 4. Or the period of the graph, you also can look the period. One cycle is from 0 to pi halves. So if you took 2 pi and divided it by pi halves, you would get 4. I like to visually just say there's 4 cycles of the graph between 0 and 2 pi. But no matter how you look at it, frequency is 4. Okay, so I think we have enough for our graph, for our equation. So we would have y equals, the amplitude is 1/2, that goes out front, sine, and the frequency goes in front of the x, 4x, and it did not shift right, left, or up or down. So you are good. All right, now we're going to make a graph given an equation. So typically it's easiest to start with the midline. So I'm going to draw a dashed line at 1 because it got shifted up 1. I like to think of that as my old x-axis because the x-axis used to be the midline of the parent function. Amplitude of 2. This is not part of your graph, but this will kind of help you give you some barriers and know, that the high and the low points are going to hit that green line just like they would hit 1 and -1 of the parent function. Okay, so I'm going to start here at 0. There is no phase shift right or left, and no frequency change. So I'm going to start here. The sine graph of the parent function starts at 0, 0. I'm pretending this is 0, 0. Then at pi halves, it's up at 1. This has an amplitude of 2 and is shifted, so it's not 1, but there's that maximum point. Okay, then we get to pi, we get back down to 0. And again, I'm saying 0 even though there's been a shift up of 1. Okay, then we get to 3 pi halves, we're at the minimum. Then we get back to 2 pi, and that's back at 0 for that full cycle. And I like to, when I go backwards, I always make a mistake. So I start at negative 2 pi. Now I go here. There. And I oftentimes accidentally draw on the x-axis instead of the midline. Okay, and then we're just gonna make our way. Boom, there we go. So much fun. All right, and check it out on Desmos to make sure you did everything right. Okay, next one, y equals 3 times the cosine of x minus 1. So the midline, negative 1. Shifted down 1, think of that as your new x-axis. Okay, amplitude of 3, 3 below, 3 above. Okay, so no shift left to right, no frequency change. So one full cycle to get from 0 to 2 pi. So cosine is a little bit harder for me to do. Sine's easier for me to visualize. Cosine starts up here. Okay, the parent function does. And then at pi halves, it's at 0, which is shifted down. Then at pi, it's down here at the minimum. Then at 3 pi halves, it's here. And then at 2 pi, it's back to 0. Okay, and then we're going to, again, going backwards is a little bit harder for me, so I start here and do it again. I don't know about you guys, but I always want to draw the points on the x-axis for some reason. Okay. There we go. And cosine, you should always be at the top of the mountain at 0 if there's been no phase shift. All right, rock and roll. Let's do 2 more. Oh, just kidding, 3 more. This is madness. Okay, next one, y equals 1/2 sine x minus 3. So midline down here, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and amplitude of 1/2. It's gonna be cute graph. Okay, no shift left, right, or no frequency change. So sine is a little bit easier for me. So sine starts here. Then at pi halves, we're up there at the maximum. Then at pi, we're back at 0. 3 pi halves, we're down here at the minimum. Then back here at 0. Consistent, be green. Okay, this looks stretched out, but that's because it's squatty. Okay, all right, next one. Graph equals 4 cosine of x. Okay, so the midline is right here. Amplitude 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you know, if I'm not renaming the y-axis, it is assumed these values are 1. If you're going to make them something different, it's important to label them. Okay, cosine. Okay, so there's no right left, no frequency change, no up down. So cosine at 0, you're at the top of the mountain. Boom. Then at pi halves, you're at the 0. At pi, you're down below. 3 pi halves, back 0. And again, I tend to make mistakes if I go backwards. Oh boy, I was nervous doing that one. Okay, last one, y equals 2 cosine of x plus 2. All right, this is fun. Okay, midline plus 2. Boop, boop. Amplitude 2. Okay, frequency, no frequency change and no right left change. That would be inside the parentheses with the x if that was a phase shift. We purposely didn't give any of those. You're welcome. Okay, so cosine at 0, you're at the top of the mountain. So you're at the top of the mountain, then at pi halves, you're back at 0. And again, I'm calling the midline 0, just because that's easier. Think of it that way. Okay. All right. Good luck. These are actually a lot of fun the more you practice them. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.